The blizzard hit like a fist. Harold's house groaned under the assault, windows rattling, walls shivering, the old wooden frame screaming against the wind. He sat alone in his armchair, wrapped in a thin blanket, staring at the dying embers in the fireplace. 74 years old. No family, no friends, just him in the cold. The phone line had snapped hours ago, buried under ice. The power was long gone. He'd spent the day rationing firewood, knowing this storm could last for days. Another night of silence. Another night of regret. He'd pushed everyone away. Friends who stopped calling, family who stopped trying. Now he had exactly what he deserved. Nothing. He closed his eyes, surrendering to the loneliness. Then he heard it. A deep, rhythmic rumble. Low and guttural, cutting through the howling wind. His eyes snapped open. Engines. Powerful ones. Getting closer. Harold dragged himself to the window. Through the swirling white chaos, he saw them, headlights piercing the darkness. 1, 2, 10, 20 motorcycles, churning through the snow, heading straight for his house. His heart pounded. Who were they? Why were they coming here? He didn't know whether to fear them or save them. The motorcycles skidded to a stop in his driveway, engines sputtering out one by one. Harold watched from the window as the riders stumbled off their bikes. Massive figures in leather jackets, their faces hidden behind scarves and frost-covered helmets. One of them collapsed into the snow. Another fell to his knees, coughing violently. Harold's heart raced. His instinct screamed at him to lock the door. Hide. Pretend he wasn't home. These men looked dangerous, tattooed, leather-clad, massive. What if they hurt him? What if they took everything he had? But then one of them looked up toward the house. Even through the storm, Harold could see the desperation in his eyes. The man tried to stand but fell again, his body shaking uncontrollably. Something broke inside Harold. Fear gave way to something stronger, compassion. He opened the door and shouted into the wind, "Get inside. Now!" They stumbled in like ghosts, 20 men, dripping water, teeth chattering, barely able to stand. Harold's small house filled instantly. They collapsed onto his couch, his chairs, his floor. One man coughed so hard he doubled over. Their leader, a tall man with a graying beard, finally spoke through chattering teeth. We were coming back from a memorial. Brother died last week. Got caught in the mountains. Roads closed behind us. We thought we could make it." Harold looked at them, really looked. These weren't criminals. They were grieving, exhausted, broken. They weren't dangerous. They were dying. Harold moved through his house like a man possessed. He dragged out every blanket he owned, lit the fireplace, boiled water on his old stove. The bikers didn't just sit there. They helped. One cleaned snow off his boots before stepping further inside. Another noticed Harold's broken cabinet hinge and fixed it without asking. A third stacked firewood by the door, organizing it better than Harold ever had. These weren't the men he'd feared. They were respectful, careful, grateful. As warmth returned to the room, the tension melted. The bikers peeled off their wet jackets, revealing faces weathered by wind and time. The leader sat closest to the fire, staring into the flames. His name was Tommy, he said quietly. Rode with us for 15 years. Heart attack took him last Tuesday. We were riding back from his funeral when the storm hit. The room fell silent. Harold saw the grief carved into their faces, raw, unfiltered, real. One biker, older with silver streaks in his beard, spoke next. "My son's deployed in the Middle East. Haven't seen him in 8 months. Tommy used to tell me, he'll come home. Just keep riding until he does." His voice cracked. "Now Tommy's gone, and I don't know if I believe it anymore." Harold's throat tightened. He remembered his own son, estranged for over a decade after a fight he couldn't even remember the details of anymore. Pride, stubbornness. Now it was too late to fix it. A younger biker, barely 25, sat in the corner shaking. Not from cold, from something deeper. His eyes were distant, haunted. Suddenly, he jerked awake from a half-sleep, gasping for air, panic flooding his face. Harold moved without thinking. He knelt beside the young man, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Hey, you're safe. You're here. Breathe." The young biker looked at him, eyes wet. I'm sorry. I keep seeing it. The accident. My brother. Harold didn't ask questions. He just stayed there, hand firm on the young man's shoulder, the way a father would. The way he wished someone had been there for him when his wife died. When his son left. When the loneliness became unbearable. The leader watched this unfold and nodded slowly, respect growing in his eyes. Hours passed. They shared stories of roads traveled, loved ones lost, mistakes made. Harold told them about his wife, Margaret, who died 5 years ago. About his son, who he hadn't spoken to since. About the life he'd wasted being angry and alone. The bikers listened. They didn't judge. They just understood. For the first time in years, Harold didn't feel like a ghost in his own house. He felt alive, connected, like he mattered. As dawn approached, the leader stood and looked outside. The storm had stopped. He turned to Harold, his expression unreadable. We need to make a call. There's something we need to do. Harold nodded, confused but trusting. He didn't know what was coming, but he felt it. Something was about to change. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, one of the bikers walked through Harold's house, noticing things the old man had stopped seeing. The roof sagging in the corner, water stains spreading across the ceiling. The cupboards, mostly empty except for a few cans of soup and stale crackers. The broken heater in the back room. The worn furniture held together with duct tape and hope. He turned to the leader and nodded toward the kitchen. They spoke in low voices, but Harold caught fragments. Living like this for years. Gave us everything he had. Barely surviving. The leader's jaw tightened. He stepped outside into the cold morning air, phone pressed to his ear. Through the window, Harold watched him pace, his voice rising and falling, animated, urgent. Who was he calling? Why? Harold busied himself making weak coffee with the last of his grounds, trying not to think about it. The bikers gathered around him, and one spoke up. You know what you did last night was rare, right? Harold shrugged. I just did what anyone would have done. No, another biker said firmly. Most people would have locked their doors. Called the cops. Been too scared. You opened yours without hesitation. You gave us everything you had. Warmth, food, shelter, even though you had almost nothing. Harold's hands trembled slightly as he poured coffee into mismatched mugs. I was alone anyway. What difference did it make? The room went quiet. The bikers exchanged glances, something unspoken passing between them. Outside, the leader ended his call and stood there for a moment, staring at the horizon. Then he smiled, not a small smile, but something big, knowing, powerful. He walked back inside, snow crunching under his boots, and looked directly at Harold. Old man, he said, his voice steady. You gave us shelter when we had nowhere to go. Now it's our turn. Harold blinked, confused. Your turn for what? The leader's smile widened. You'll see. Tomorrow morning. Just, don't be surprised when you look outside. Harold wanted to ask more, but something in the leader's eyes told him to wait. To trust. The bikers began gathering their things, preparing to leave. One by one, they shook Harold's hand, hugged him, thanked him. The young biker with the nightmares held on a little longer. You reminded me what kindness looks like, he whispered. And then they were gone. Engines roaring back to life, disappearing down the snowy driveway, leaving Harold alone once again. But this time, the silence felt different. Not empty, expectant. He didn't know what was coming. But tomorrow morning, everything would change. Harold woke to silence. The storm had passed. Sunlight streamed through the frosted windows, painting everything gold. He sat up slowly, expecting the house to feel empty again, the way it always did. But then he heard it. A rumble. Distant at first, like thunder rolling across the mountains. But it didn't fade. It grew. Louder. Closer. Deeper. Harold stumbled to the window and froze. Over the ridge, headlights appeared. 1, 2, 10, 20. They kept coming. Motorcycles pouring down the mountain road like a river of steel and chrome. Engines roaring in perfect rhythm. 50 bikes. 100. More. His heart pounded. He rushed outside, still in his robe, feet crunching through the snow. The cold bit at his skin, but he didn't feel it. He couldn't look away. 200 motorcycles surrounded his house, lining the driveway, filling the clearing, stretching back into the trees. Riders stood beside their bikes, arms crossed, faces solemn and respectful. Patches from different states, different clubs, different chapters. They'd come from everywhere. Harold's breath caught in his throat. What is this? The leader from the night before stepped forward, his voice steady and strong. You opened your door when you didn't have to. You gave 20 strangers everything you had. Warmth, food, shelter, when you barely had enough for yourself. That word spread across our network last night. From state to state, club to club. And this. He gestured to the sea of motorcycles. This is what happens when brotherhood hears about real kindness. Harold's eyes filled with tears. I didn't do anything special. You did, another rider said, stepping forward. You reminded us what we stand for. Loyalty, respect, protecting those who protect us. The leader nodded. Brotherhood never forgets kindness, and we never abandon our own. A rider near the back revved his engine once. Then another. Within seconds, 200 engines roared to life in unison. A deafening, beautiful symphony of gratitude and respect. Harold covered his mouth, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone. He wasn't forgotten. He was surrounded by family. The leader walked forward holding a thick envelope. Every club that heard your story contributed. This is for you. Groceries, heating, whatever you need to get through the winter. Harold shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I can't accept this. You already did, the leader said firmly, pressing it into his hands. When you opened that door. Behind him, bikers were already moving. Carpenters walked the perimeter of his house, measuring the sagging roof, marking damaged boards. Others unloaded trucks filled with firewood, stacking it neatly by his door, enough to last 2 winters. Volunteers carried boxes of food into his kitchen, filling the empty cupboards until they overflowed. One biker approached holding a wooden plaque, hand-carved and polished. It read, Harold Mitchell, brother of the road, kindness never forgotten. Harold's hands trembled as he took it. I don't deserve this. You do, the young biker from the night before said, stepping forward. He held something in his hands, a leather patch with the club's emblem. Gently, he pinned it to Harold's jacket. You're one of us now. Forever. The young man's voice cracked. And I called my father. After what you said last night. He's driving here right now. I'm going to see him for the first time in 3 years. Harold pulled him into a hug, sobbing openly now. Decades of loneliness, regret, and isolation shattered in that moment. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't forgotten. He was loved. As the sun climbed higher, 200 engines roared in unison, a final salute that echoed across the valley. Harold stood in his doorway, wearing his new patch, tears drying on his face, watching the bikers prepare to leave. But they didn't leave forever. Over the following weeks, they returned. Some brought meals. Others stopped by just to talk. His house became a landmark along their routes, a place of warmth, stories, and belonging. Harold was never alone again. The storm hadn't brought danger. It had brought family. And here's the truth that changed everything. One act of kindness, one open door, rippled across hundreds of miles and touched hundreds of lives. Harold thought he was just helping strangers survive a storm. But what he really did was remind an entire brotherhood what mattered most. Compassion, loyalty, connection. You never know when a single moment of courage will change everything. Not just for others, but for you too. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss stories that restore your faith in humanity. And drop a comment. Tell me about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness. Let's keep this energy going, because the world needs more open doors.